#1 success coach in America, I'd actually say the world, and also co-writer and co-author of all of the Chicken Soup book series. And the big one, which we're going to be talking about today, is the Success Principles, which is in its 10th year now.
Yes, the 10th anniversary revised edition.
Yeah.
A big celebration.
So, Jack, what I wanted to ask, because everyone who's watching this, they're going to have a chance to go download the Genius, a guide to success, and also do the mission. And one of the biggest things in the book is this whole element of each principle being timeless.
Yes.
So we are 10 years in now.
Yes.
What would you say out of your experience the last 10 years has been a shift, if any, between which of the principles you've seen in there are the ones that have become more important? Or are you seeing that they basically all are as timeless as they were 10 years ago?
I think they're all pretty timeless. I mean, the idea of taking 100% responsibility, of having a purpose, so that you're coming from your goals are being set from your soul's purpose rather than from your ego.
Yeah.
The importance of believing in yourself, surrounding yourself with a team of positive people, taking action, responding to feedback, persevering in the face of obstacles. I mean, you can go back and start reading Romans and the Greeks, and they were all saying this. And so those principles. Now, some of the principles that are in the revised edition of this book, we have a whole section now called Success in the Digital Age.
Right.
Because when I wrote this book, Facebook and Google, and all those things weren't that big. And now we have crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, developing your brand, having a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things you can do to accelerate your success.
Yeah.
So those principles are, I think I have a principle called embrace change. And if you don't embrace change, you get overwhelmed by it, And so I think, in this specific version of the book, the idea of the technical revolution that's occurred, the technological revolution, is something you need to embrace. But the concept of embracing change, that may change over the years. There may be some whole new breakthrough you've got to embrace. But we also put in a chapter here on leadership, because I think everybody's realizes they're a leader.
Yeah.
And so it's not just people that have that position in a company, but anybody can stand up and lead. And there's so many things that we need to be leading about, environmental sustainability and, fair justice in the world and social change and so forth. So, but I would say that 100% responsibility is the first principle in the book. It's core.
Yeah.
If you're a blamer, a complainer, you're not going to be that successful. I think some things that are new in the book, also I just thought of, is that we used to think that fear was something that you just had to push through. And now we have all this technology like EFT where you can tap on acupuncture points and all of a sudden your fear disappears.
Right.
You can meditate and the fear will dissolve. There's a lot of technology that we have now in psychology and self-help that makes it easier. I think it was harder before. You had to push through things. And now we're finding we can let things dissolve through mindfulness and things like that. So I always say to people, success is actually getting easier, not harder. You still have to work and you have to be conscious and you need to know some things. And a lot of what blocks success is fear, limiting beliefs. And a lot of times if you're not conscious of those, then you can't deal with them.
Yeah.
But we're getting even more sophisticated at how to get conscious about what's stopping us. So this is like a blueprint.
Yeah.
And if you follow a blueprint, you end up with the same thing every time if you do it exactly the same way. So I've always said that the problem with success is that it's like a combination to a lock, and many people are missing some of the numbers. And I don't care how many times you do a combination, if 2 numbers are missing, it's not going to open.
Right.
Or if you have the numbers in the wrong order. But if you have all the numbers in the right order, I call it a system. The system always works if you always work the system.
Yeah, so I want to come back to that because you've gone through and you've actually itemized down and you put them in an order, like the combination.
Yes.
Back to the point around just how much things have changed. Like you mentioned one thing, which is information. Like there's more tools today than ever.
Right.
There's almost the danger of too much choice. You get paralyzed by
yes.
which course should I do or how should I do it. And the second thing is distractions. There's so many more distractions today. And we've seen that with our kids, and we're seeing that even in having to make choices every day, which before may not have been so overwhelming as well. So leadership and self-leadership, it occurs to me, like when going through the book, every principle is about how to direct and get to know yourself better as opposed to be taking all the noise that's out there as well. What would you say to someone who's going, it's not that easy. It's like, I've tried all sorts of different things and hasn't yet been exposed to the book in terms of what you've seen when people actually start just following through on the system and the kind of results they end up getting?
Well, to give you an example, I was in the Philippines about 5 years ago, and I got interviewed by a guy the night before I was going to do my one-day seminar in Manila. And at the end of the interview, I said, "John, that was the best interview I think I've ever had." how long have you been doing this? He said, you're my first interview. I said, John, I said, what's the story? He said, well, he was running a restaurant. The two partners got in a big fight, ruined the business, bankrupted. Girlfriend left him because he didn't have any money. He's couch surfing because he can't afford to have an apartment. I said, John, how much money do you have? He says, $3.28. So I gave him $20. I said, this is your dinner and your cab fare home. I gave him a copy of my book, which I had to buy from the bookstore because I didn't have any. I came back 2.5 years later, and he walks in, he's wearing a blue blazer with this beautiful gold logo on it, but 15 guys behind him all wearing polo shirts with the same logo. He's wearing gold Doc Martens shoes. He's looking really spiffy. I said, aren't you the guy that interviewed me last year, a couple years ago? He said, yeah. I said, what happened? He said, I read your book and I decided your life worked. You're a multimillionaire, you've got a great family, you're healthy, you know. And he said, my life sucked. So I decided I'm going to do everything in that book in the exact order the guy says. He says, I now have a home and a condo at the beach, a boat, a car, another car, a TV show, a radio show. My group, he became the #1 motivational speaker in the Philippines. His groups were averaging 600,000 people, and he was now known as the money magnet. And I said, amazing. He said, well, you laid it out, I did it, it worked.
Okay, so, and I definitely, for everyone who has not yet got a copy of the book, get a copy of the book and follow that through. And on the mission we go through as well, so you can actually assess and see how you're doing on each one. But there's a real difference of, as we're hearing, you know, here at this program, where we were talking about the difference of like hearing and listening. And
yes.
Let's just take an example of that, like the very first of the principles, where you take 100% responsibility for your life. And there'll be some people who are like, yep, I'm doing that already, right? If you were to express what you really mean by that, when someone's like, yeah, I am doing it, but then there's still some complaining happening, or they're still saying, but I could only do that because I only had this circumstance, what would you share you really mean when you're talking about 100% responsibility?
Well, I mean 100%, not 99%. In fact, I have a chapter in the book also called 99%'s a bitch, 100%'s a breeze. 100%'s a breeze. Because when you commit to something 99%, it's like every morning if you're going to run, you have to decide every single morning, am I going to run today?
Right.
Because you're 99% committed. I always ask people, if you were married, how would you like a 99% commitment to monogamy? You know, it's like every day you're wondering, is today the day he's going to cheat on me? You know, right? So once you've made that 100% commitment, then it means no blaming, no complaining. Now, that's easy to say, it's hard to do.
Right.
I wore a rubber band on my wrist for years. And every time I would complain or blame and I would get caught, I would snap myself. In my company, we have a fishbowl in the office. Anyone complains or blames, $2 fine. Right. In my seminars, they're on the corner of the front of the room on the stage. So, and it's not to punish people, but it's to say, let's become aware of what you're doing, because when you blame or complain, there's a cost. You may not know it, but I want you to make you aware there's a cost. So complaining means I have a reference point that there's something out there I prefer, or I wouldn't complain. If I'm complaining about the weather, I know there's better weather. Yeah. Well, am I willing to move to have that weather? You know, like move out of Washington where it's overcast a lot down to LA. And so most people would rather complain than take a risk. So complaining means I have a reference point of something better I prefer that I'm not willing to risk creating. So basically, when you find yourself complaining, if you want to be a powerful person, ask yourself, what do I prefer? What would it take to get there? And then let's start doing steps to do that. And if you don't know the steps, I would say find somebody who's already done what you want to do, ask them how they did it. Success leaves clues, one of Tony Robbins' great quotes, which I love. Blaming basically means I think I'm out of control. It's this mistaken belief that I'm not in control of my life. Now, ultimately, there's spiritual stuff and all that. You have to let's talk about this for a minute, because I think there's a really important distinction that Michael Beckwith makes, and I believe him, that if you're a victim, you believe God's doing it to me, the world's doing it to me, I have no power. The second stage of spiritual development is I realize there are some principles and rules, and many of them are in this book, right, that if I follow them, they work. And so I start manipulating the universe. I become a manipulator of God's energy in a sense. So, but if you reach another point where you begin to go, well, if these principles and laws work, where are these laws coming from? There must be something bigger. And that's when you begin to say, I want to start surrendering to that. Not my will, but thy will. And that's why the second chapter of my book is all about purpose, which is to say, okay, where is your purpose coming from? Is it from a higher place? Or is it from money, greed, ego, that? So if your goals are set from that place, then you're going to be combining the principles of laws of the second phase with the first phase, the third phase, which is surrender to a higher will. The fourth phase is you realize I'm not surrendering and being a channel for God's energy. I am God. Now, I'm not all of God any more than a tablespoon of water is all the ocean. But that tablespoon of water, when it's in the water, is the ocean.
Right.
And so we're all progressing through those stages. And so for me, taking 100% responsibility in the first stage means, okay, I'm not going to blame anyone else, not going to blame God. I'm going to take responsibility, learn to use these principles. And when something doesn't work out, I don't go, oh, it was the economy, it was the president, it was the Indians, the Chinese, the Iranians, whatever. It's called, I didn't study enough. I didn't listen well enough. I didn't take the time to do it correctly. I got defensive, all those things. The biggest complaint I get about responsibility is people go, well, I got cancer. You're not going to hold me responsible for that, are you? And I go, well, let me just ask you a few questions. Do you drink only water that comes from a good source, doesn't have PBA from the plastic in it? Do you eat only organic food? Do you detox at least once every month or so and take a couple of days and detox your body? Are you wearing some kind of EMF prevention device because we're surrounded by EMFs? Are you watching a lot of negativity? Have you forgiven everybody in your life? There's a lot of stuff that we know leads to cancer. And they all go, no, I didn't know about it. Well, who's responsible to know that? You are. If I give you a car, you should read the manual. It'd be a smart thing to do,
I think that whole process of taking responsibility, that's why you put it as number one, because it's so fundamental to everything else that comes from it. And just you going through the awareness, I think is really interesting as well. You clearly, and that's what makes you so good at what you do, have this high awareness of what actually is working, and then you codify it down as well. You talk about your mentor and how you started getting these principles in the first place.
Right.
Can you share a bit about how you got it, and at what point did you say, you know what, this is it, right? I don't need to go looking for another 20 or 30 of these. This is where it's at. How did that happen?
Well, I got out of graduate school, and basically I took a seminar, and it was on this kind of stuff. W. Clement Stone, self-made multimillionaire, $600 million at the time. That would be a billionaire by today's inflation. And he was a good friend of Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich. Right. He actually co-authored a book with Napoleon Hill. And when he hired me to work in his foundation, he interviewed me. He said, it was a couple of questions. He said, do you take 100% responsibility for your life? I said, I think so. He said, son, it's a yes or no answer. I said, well, I don't even know what it means. And he said, have you ever blamed anybody? Yes. Have you ever complained? Yes. Well, then you don't take 100% responsibility. He asked me, he said, do you only surround yourself with positive people? And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, make a list of all the people you know, your family, your friends, anyone you hang out with, put a plus sign next to everyone who's always positive, encouraging, supportive, loving, goal-oriented. Put a minus sign next to the people that kind of suck the energy out of you. They're negative, they're judgmental. And my mother had a minus sign. And Clement Stone said, he said, don't hang out with the people with the minus signs. And I said, Bill, what? That's my mom. He says, Christmas and Easter, that's it. And she was really negative. And so I did. I started limiting my behavior. And I now when you're sitting here together with me at this Transformational Leadership Council meeting, because I created an organization and invited only positive people and asked them to invite their friends as well. But it's one of the most loving, powerful environments, and I keep creating that for myself. And because of that, my life is fairly magical.
So you're living the principles, and we have Janet Atwood here as well. She created the Passion Test with Chris Atwood. We have the Genius Test that people are also taking, and you mentioned both of them as principles as well, right?
Yeah.
Really to come towards the principles with passion, and also to be focusing at your genius, so that you're not spending your time trying to do everything. Could you share a bit about that for everyone who's like, okay, I need to try and do everything, and realizing the difference between following the principles and having support of a success team to help them to do that as well?
Well, here's the deal. You've got to get in touch with what your passion is. Your passion is when you feel excited, when you just wake up and you just want to go do it. It's like it's the day after Christmas, you want to go play with your toys, And so that's feedback telling you that you're on course. It's like a GPS system, and the guidance is run by joy and happiness and expansion rather than contraction and all of that. And so the passion test is very important. In fact, the TLC group wouldn't exist without Janet's passion test, because it was in that passion test I took with her that my number one passion was hanging out with positive, supportive, people that wanted to make a difference in the world. And she said, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much are you doing that right now? And I said, about a 5. She said, well, what would you have to do to create that? And that's when we created Transformational Leadership Council. So surrounding yourself with all those people and being passionate and then saying, okay, here's what I'm going to do. And then what I did, I went out and interviewed 75 of the most successful people in North America who were passionate in their fields. And I said, well, what are the principles of success that have guided your life? And they were the same ones. I had made a list first, and they were the same ones. So then I said, okay, now that we know what we're passionate about, now that we know what our purpose is, now that we're taking 100% responsibility, what are the things that all successful people do? And it's studyable, just like what does a good chef do? How do they think? What do they visualize? Who do they hang out with? How do they spend their mornings, whatever. So all of that is what I tried to put into one book. And so far, everyone's said it works. So I'm excited about that. But there are anything that someone can do, anyone else can learn to do it. We know that even people that can't sing can learn to sing on key.
Right.
Talent is highly overrated. It's actually, I want to go back to core genius, because I do think we have some core geniuses that are uniquely ours, and we shouldn't try to do everything.
Yeah.
There are those Leonardo da Vinci's who we call, Renaissance people who have more than one talent. But for me, my core genius is inspiring and empowering people to live their highest vision in the context of love and joy. I inspire people with Chicken Soup for the Soul stories, and some of the stories are in this book, and I empower people by giving them tools in my seminars and this book like this, so they can actually take the inspiration and make it real. Because if you're inspired without tools, technology, knowledge, and wisdom, you're going to be frustrated. That's what creates revolutions.
Yeah.
People with upward mobile aspirations but no tools to get there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you have a lot of tools but no inspiration, you're going to use the hammer to kill someone instead of to build a mausoleum.
The whole I'm fascinated by the whole process of distilling knowledge from past mentors, and then following them through, and with every generation we're getting more and more articulate as to what's working, what's not working as well. And it's an ongoing pathway, and I really want everyone to get that as well. You wrote the book, you clearly lived the principles, and the principles talk about every single year. You're looking at what are your milestones, what are your goals, how you're setting yourself up for the future. So that's my last question to you, Jack. What's this year hold for you? What's for you the big thing, the big vision, the big thing that you're really committed and focused to?
Well, the big thing I'm committed to this year are a couple of things. One, I want to sell about 500,000 copies of this book, because everywhere I go, I was just in Iran, and this 16-year-old boy came to my training, and he said, I've been reading your books in Farsi, and I've been watching your YouTube videos in English. He said, I taught myself English so I could study more with you.
Wow.
And he said he wants to go to Harvard and become a doctor. And so I know a book can transform a life. I didn't used to think that. I thought you had to have some kind of deep experience, but a book can create that. So I'm excited about that. The other major goal is we've been now training trainers to actually teach this in workshops, not just to talk about it, but to do experiential exercises that totally transform you out of the experience. And we've now trained 500 people in live seminars, but what we're doing now, we just finished a home study program, Train the Trainer home study program, where we videotaped a year of 3 week-long workshops, distilled it down into 40 hours of video with lots of manuals, the workshop descriptions and outlines, so anybody can watch it online. Yeah. And then they have to do a half-day workshop and a one-day workshop, record part of it, send it to us, and then we'll certify them. Our goal, believe it or not, is 1 million people teaching the success principles somewhere on the planet by the year 2030. And that's actually doable. My staff and I came up with it, and I didn't even buy into it. Okay. And then I did the math one day. It's like a giant chain letter. If we train somebody and then they train them to train others and so forth, we can actually get there by 2030. So if we could have 1 million people doing it, and they all run, I forget that exact number now, so many workshops, we can actually reach all 7 billion people on the planet. That to me is a game worth playing. That's what I'm excited about.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
For everyone who just heard what Jack said, I think as well as the fact that there's these big goals, and every year the better you get at achieving them, the bigger they get as well. It doesn't stop, is the fact that like some of the goals that Jack's going for now are the ones that his team came up with. And that's really the whole point about these principles, is that they're so easy to then pass on, so others get inspired to play that game, and they lift you up as well.
Right.
Which I think is awesome. So actions from this video: make sure, number one, first of all, you get the book. So this is actually the new latest one, which is the 10th anniversary, which is coming out right now. So make sure you get the book. Just by getting a book and getting connected up, with Jacqueline's organization, it means that you're in touch as well with the whole Train the Trainer program, and you can be part of that whole goal as well. Take the mission and also download the Genius Guide to Success, and really in the coming year, commit to these principles. And I really look forward to hearing your story in the years to come. Thanks very much, Jack.
Can I tell people what our website is?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, go to jackcanfield.com, and if you go to the successprinciplesbook.com, we actually have, you can download the first 2 chapters of the book before it even comes from wherever you're going to buy it. And you also will get a couple of other things. There's a free video you can download on goal setting, and there's also a poster. It's an infographic poster about what we call the daily disciplines of success, because success isn't something that happens like now. It's little disciplines over time that do it. So anyway, I want you to go there and check all that out, and I really appreciate you having me here and letting me share with your people. Thanks you so much.
Thanks very much.